A 420 MSP, Harry here, and today is a special day, a new topic for us. I'm with Clint Latham from IT Guru in Denver, Colorado. And Clint, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself briefly? Your background. I know you went to law school and you work
Yeah,
at an MSP in Denver. So what's your story? And then we'll talk animals.
that's a pretty loaded question. Yeah, I mean, I was working in the technology space to put myself through law school and had dreams of grandeur of moving to the Bay Area to practice medicine. More specifically, excuse me, uh, in the endurance sports arena is kind of where I envisioned myself being kind of a corporate attorney for maybe one of the larger corporations like Specialized or Santa
Yeah.
Cruz, or one of those companies. As I was graduating and finishing up my degree and sitting for the bar exam, an opportunity came up with Joe and IT Guru, and it just seemed like the right fit, and I kind of went with it, and that's kind of yeah, that's kind of been the deal. So I have stayed put in the technology realm.
Good, good. Well, I think you made the better decision, my friend. So, we talked about a month ago, and we decided, well, let's do an on-camera interview. So, sir, I would hold you out to be a global expert in the field of cannabis and animals. I mean, you really know your stuff. So, why don't I just turn the talking stick over to you and kind of walk us through what is the story with veterinarians and cannabis and animals and so on. Go.
All right. So I will preface it with this. It's very nice of you to say that I know a lot. I really don't know that much. I think I'm only beginning to scratch the surface about what there is to know about the ECS system. So we all have an endocannabinoid system, and really in the medicine side of things, you're just using cannabis to modulate that system to achieve some sort of endpoint, right? So you're kind of manipulating that system. A lot of the things that I have learned have been all thanks to veterinary Again, I am not
Okay.
a representative of them. I don't work for them. All of the things that I'm going to talk about are the things that I have learned, and I may be off at some point. So please don't go back to them and get mad if I say something that maybe is slightly incorrect. Um, but if you do have questions, definitely check them out because they are kind of leading the space with their cardiologists. Um, they're the lead DVM, Dr. Kassar Andre. They're oncologists. They have a neurologist. They're really, they're writing the book on veterinary medicine and cannabis treatments, essentially. So with that being said, my interest really got sparked because my dog was diagnosed with TCC cancer, which is essentially cancer in the epithelial cells. Epithelial cells are cells that turn over really quickly. So in this case, it's in his bladder and his prostate. So these are cells that should normally turn over, I think it's like every 48, 72 hours, that sort of thing, and die off. However, now he has masses in his trichome. So the bladder is kind of shaped like like a triangle, and he has masses down here in the bottom and around the side. So what we are concerned with is mitigating the cancer growth, the inflammation, and potentially inducing some sort of apoptosis in those cells. Because as we know with cancer, the biggest problem is that the cells don't know how to die. And so they keep turning over on top of each other, and that's what leads to the mass, and those cells never die. One of the things that leads to that is chronic inflammation. And so I was initially interested in more specifically the CBD side and how to fight that inflammation. And so once my dog was diagnosed, this is a N of 1. So this is there's a lot of research on this, but in my case, again, it's an N of 1, so it may not be right for you and your pet. But we were diagnosed. We've got the official diagnosis in August of 2018, and we were given a 4-week prognosis saying that the cancer was so big and so bad that the way that dogs age and the speed at which they age, we maybe had 4 weeks. It is now January 2020, and he's still alive and kicking. So with that being said, I started researching the use of CBD, and of course with all my connections in the veterinary industry, I came across Dr. Andre and her team, And so we immediately started getting him on a cannabis therapy. So back to my original statement where it's like, well, with cannabis, you're trying to modulate the ECS system. So we all have an endocannabinoid system internally that we all create these cannabinoids, the cannabinoids that are found in the plant. With CBD, what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell the body, a lot of people think that CBD is actually the anti-inflammatory. It's like taking an NSAID, like ibuprofen or something like that. But really what it's doing is it's telling the body, hey, when you create your own anti-inflammatory response, so in my dog's case, when you're saying, hey, I'm trying to fight the inflammation in the bladder with this disease that's going on, rather than kind of killing off the endocannabinoids or the CBD compound internally, let's hold on to those a little bit longer. So our body has this, or the body in general, I should say, especially with animals, is it always wants to return to a state of homeostasis, but when things get out of whack, it can be harder to do that. And so with CBD, what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell the body, hey, normally you would, your response is to fight the inflammation for 4 hours. By inducing CBD, it's telling the body now maybe fight it for 6 hours, 7 hours, or whatever that time frame may be is, but it's just lengthening the time that the body's naturally fighting that inflammation. Dr. Andre told me that there's these like enzymes that are released that kind of triggers the body to say, hey, when do you start, when you start and stop the inflammation fighting? And they're not sure if it actually triggers, it stops the enzyme from being produced that would kind of then normally tell these natural occurring CBD molecules or whatever they are to stop producing, but rather, or if it actually kind of shields them and protects them from being destroyed by this enzyme. The book's still kind of out on that. So we're not really sure how that piece works.
Man. Wow.
Yeah, so that's the CBD side. So to kind of fast forward a year, we are now working to include, there are different CBD molecules. So we started with just general CBD. And to back up, the way that we tried to take a very Western medicine approach to this is that we have a company in Denver that produces, they're called Iovia. Again, I don't work for Iovia. This isn't a statement for Iovia. It's just a product that we have liked and really used. So, and the reason for that is that they provide us with a COA. So we can see all the compounds that are in their tinctures, and we know if there's any heavy metals, any other toxins we need to be aware of, as well as the exact dosing. So how much CBD are we actually getting in the tincture? And so this allows us to really fine tune in like a Western medicine approach, the amount of each compound that we're using. So we were using Iovia's CBD, high CBD tincture, which is basically a 20-to-1. So it's 20-to-1 CBD to THC. And those were the only two compounds in the tincture. So while it was a full plant extract, we were not including any of the terpenes, or for people that are familiar, the stuff that gives cannabis that smell. So like if you're driving over that smell, those are the terpenes. It's not actually the CBD or the THC. And then we were sourcing from them a 1-to-1 CBD to THC tincture, again by the same company, but it was just a higher ratio, and we were blending the two to make a 3-to-1 ratio. I can't give you the exact reason why the oncologist and Dr. Andre decided that they wanted a 3-to-1, but based on the research that's coming out of Israel, that was the direction they were going. I honestly have never really asked why the 3-to-1. Now that I think about it, kind of dawns me. I'm interested why I never asked that question. But so then what we were doing is we're now starting to understand that the terpenes in the plant also have a major impact on how those compounds are then actually modulating our own internal endocannabinoid system, the ECS system. And so there are certain terpenes that affect how that are going to work better for different cells and different parts of the body. And so Kasara's oncologist started looking at saying, well, what is the research saying as far as these terpene compounds that's going to be most effective in supporting the epithelial cellular system? So we actually found 3 compounds. One is caraphenolene, limonene, and then there's one third one that I'm kind of drawing the blank on, but there's 3 compounds that we needed. And so we sourced those from a company that is essentially, ironically, what's interesting is that they're pulling out these terpenes to kind of sell to cannabis manufacturers, so you can have like a banana kush flavored oil,
Exactly.
all these kind of crazy flavors. So in that respect, I guess I'm going to use a really negative term here, but from the stoner side of things, it was a real benefit to us because there's companies that were already sourcing and extracting these individual terpenes that we could then add back in. So we were custom blending these oils and then mixing in the terpenes. And again, from an N of 1 and from my dog's use case, I 100% can see a difference between just the raw CBD and THC oil to the oil that is mixed with the terpenes. He walks better, he walks further, he sleeps better, his overall quality of life is better when we have the terpenes mixed in the oil. So the THC side of things, why were we adding, a lot of people hear the old adage that THC is a poison to dogs. Well, it's very similar in humans, right? If you ingest too much THC, like if you eat an edible, it's one of those things where it's like a roller coaster ride you can't get off of, right? You go through these kind of crazy highs and lows, and if you inhale too much THC, you get really, really high, and it can be a really unpleasant experience.
Yeah.
The same thing is for animals. So that it's not necessarily a poison per se, as much as it is did they just get too high? They just get uncomfortable because they're in this weird place and they don't know why. So you really have to be careful in the dosing and how much THC you're giving your dog. But
and I have a question. Yeah, if you don't mind, I have a question
Yeah.
about that, because a lot of the viewers at 420 MSP and the parent company SMB Nation know for many years our mascot was an English Springer Spaniel named Astro. And unfortunately, Astro got to 14.5 years. He lived his expected life, and he became ill. I don't even know what he had, but we weren't going to invest thousands of dollars in a dog where every dog has their day, as
Right.
they say. So we were fine with that. I go to the vet. We're having Astro looked at and assessed, and the vet, first of all, the veterinarian, the lady was pretty uncomfortable talking about cannabis. It was not a comfortable professional conversation for her to have. That's number one. Number two, she told me THC is toxic to dogs. And so I'm glad you clarified that. That's what I was led to believe. Number three, Clint, I went to the dispensary on Bainbridge Island and got these little dog biscuits. And what was really cool about the bud tender, because folks, you need to understand there's bud tenders that really know what they're doing. And the bud tender had me break the cookie in half because of the size and weight of my dog relative to the portion of the cookie. So the dog would only eat a half at a time. And Clint, maybe a little bit like your experience, I swear for the next couple of hours, Astro was in a better way. So instead of circling around his little dog pad to finally be able to lay down, he was able to essentially lay down. You know what I'm saying? You can see the improvement.
Yeah. So what's interesting about that is while Dr. Andre and veterinariancannabis.org is working with me on my dog and his cancer case, or in oncology realm, Dr. Andre is actually more interested in the use of cannabis and THC for behavioral issues in dogs, anxiety, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So for, the one thing that we always monitor with my dog is that what we call the 1,000-yard stare. Now, because my dog has been on cannabis for so long, he builds up a tolerance just like a person would, right? So if you're using a lot of cannabis, it takes more and more to reach that same effect. And so as we increase the dose, the one thing that we watch for is what we call the 1,000-yard stare. So it's not to that toxicity level where, so most veterinarians, when they think of cannabis toxicity, it's because the dog found an edible somewhere, consumed way too many grams per kg, and now they're really, really, really high. And the symptoms you start to see are wobbliness, they're unable to walk around, they can't control their bladder, they're urinating on themselves, those sorts of things. And so that is at a point where it is toxic because the animal is kind of incapacitated. There is a study, if you go onto PubMed, where they studied small animals, a whole variety of small animals, and at I think it was up to 9,000 milligrams of THC per kg. So
Whoa.
yeah, so I mean, if somebody gave me that amount of THC, I would be on another planet. Like I would turn into the blue guy from The Watchmen, you know, Dr. Whatever his name is, and I would be living on Mars, right? Like that's how intense it would be. The only animal that actually died was a dormouse. The reason for the death of the dormouse was because their metabolisms run so high that at that volume of THC, it slowed the metabolism down so much that it went into hypothermia, and it essentially killed the dormouse. So one way, but with that being said, now that is an extreme amount of THC, and I would never recommend that, and I don't think any veterinarian would recommend that. But generally, the guidelines that I have been given, and again, check with veterinaricancannabis.org, or have your veterinarian reach out to them, because they can give you an exact dosing for your dog and what's all right. So in our dog's case, again, this is just me, we started with 0.01 milligrams of THC per kilogram. So I have a little Yorkie, he's 5 pounds. You know, we're doing a very, very small amount of THC initially. And so then we say, well, why would we want to use THC? For a lot of the things that we see with human oncology patients, pain management is one of the big things. So if you're working on trying to modulate the pain in the endocannabinoid system, THC is the way to do that. So we fight the inflammation with the CBD compounds, and we fight the pain management with the THC. There are a lot of studies, if you go onto PubMed, about, like there's a study that you'll find about brain cancer patients where the THC was actually killing and sending the cells into apoptosis. One thing to keep in mind with that is that they had actually drilled stents into the skulls of the patients and were dripping THC directly onto the cells themselves. So biology is very, very complicated, and we live in a very complicated world. And so how that THC modulates once it goes through the digestive system and it gets into the bloodstream is going to be very different from, you know, tapping directly to the brain. However, we do know that we are thinking that there is some mechanism that would lead to apoptosis and help keep those cancer cells from growing. Again, as an N of 1, and just from my personal experience, our dog had a very severe case of cancer that we were given 4 weeks, and we have been able to kill enough cancer cells to where the growth isn't continuing, it's staying stagnant, and we have kind of a stable disease, for lack of a better term, using cannabis therapy. Also, with that being said, we are also doing other things as well. He is on piroxicam, he is on a healthier diet, you know, so we are doing other things. We did a initial round of chemotherapy when we first found out. So we did kind of use the sledgehammer approach towards this cancer treatment. But I would say without a doubt that it is my personal opinion that without the cannabis therapy, we don't get to this point. I mean, with just piroxicam alone, again, on PubMed, there's a great study from the University of Purdue, where I got my law degree from. But if you go they did a big study on piroxicam and its effectiveness on epithelial cell cancer, or TCC cancer. The median age was 8 months. So we have exceeded the median age for piroxicam alone. So if I take a pillared approach and I look at the effectiveness of the chemotherapy, I look at the effectiveness of the piroxicam, and then I look at what the effectiveness of the cannabis treatment should be, looking at all 3 pillars of these, it gives me a strong foundation to come to the conclusion that in our case, had we not used the cannabis treatment, our dog may not have lived as long. We may have gotten to that median age of 8 months if we were lucky, because that's kind of average use case with just piroxicam and chemotherapy treatments. So that's kind of a lot of what's going on.
No, I have been schooled, my fine feathered veterinarian friend or IT friend in the veterinarian space. 2 comments. One would be, I'm going to go to that website. Can you repeat the .org website again, please?
Yeah, it's Veterinary cannabis.org.
Okay, thank you. And I'll put that down below in the blog. But
Yeah.
what I'm interested in, and again, I'm no doctor. I just play an oncologist on YouTube. But what I'm interested in is your colleague or your friend who is studying the behavioral effects, because the little bit I know about the medical side of cannabis, I had a palliative care doctor once tell me the cannabis is going to do three things. First of all, cannabis does not cure cancer, right? Let's just get that elephant out of the room.
Right.
But what it's going to do is it's going to work on anxiety, it's going to work on appetite, and it's going to work on nausea. And so I put that kind of over in the behavioral side. And I'm going to go to that site because, Clint, I got to tell you, Astro, my English Springer Spaniel, rest in peace, but he had separation anxiety. Like when we would leave the house, he got very anxious. And this is over 14 years. I mean, it was just hardwired in him. So I'm very curious about the behavioral side. And then the last question in the comment is, with your firm's MSP practice in Denver, Colorado, niched on the veterinarian vertical, are you detecting these conversations? You know, like when you go to Austin, Texas, Joe was here recently, your colleague, helping set up a veterinarian practice. Well, CBD is legal in Texas. Is this a common conversation in the veterinarian field, right? Is it in the open?
Yeah, it's rough because unfortunately most veterinarians are living the EMyth story. So if you haven't read the EMyth book, definitely get it out. They're the technician that can't get out of the business, so they're working in the business instead of on the business.
Yeah.
So when you're in that realm, you can only keep up on so much when you're trying to just keep your business afloat, right? So I think a lot of them, they're getting requests from all their client bases, and they're constantly being asked for recommendations for using cannabis in whatever ailments might be there. I mean, I think if you walk to the mall now, there's a kiosk every 5 feet that's selling some sort of magical CBD pain relief oil, which I think is something that is very important that I have learned throughout this process, from going to the Veterinary Innovation Summit at Texas A&M, actually going to like the cannabis continuing education courses at BMX, which is one of the largest veterinary conferences in the country and also Western. At all of these continuing education courses, the number one thing that comes out is that veterinarians don't know what to recommend or use. Okay. So the thing is if people are interested in it, you have to know that if the company that you're going to order the tinctures from, so even if it's hemp-based, that's another important piece, is that everybody thinks that, I'm even a member of a Cannabis for Cancer Dogs Facebook group, and some of the lies that are spilled from the people running the group is that, oh, well, hemp is not going to do anything. Well, the truth is that if you have terpenes in combination with CBD compounds, whether that's CBDG, CBD, or CBDA, CBDA is actually another interesting conversation because we're starting to include CBDA in our therapy just this week. But if you include those compounds, it's going to be effective. So to kind of cycle back to my original point is that if you're going to order a cannabis tincture, whether it's hemp-based and you're just looking to get a quality CBD oil to help mitigate some inflammation, you need to make sure that the company you're buying for will offer you a link to a COA. If they're not willing to offer you that link, do not buy anything from them, because more than likely there's a good chance that the product they're selling doesn't actually have any CBD in it, and it's snake oil. I think I can't remember where the resource came from. If I can find it, I'll send you the link. But they did a bunch of random tests. They ordered products from a lot of the leading cannabis companies out there offering CBD products, and I think it was like 1% of them actually contained any CBD in the products. So there's a lot of snake oil that's being sold, unfortunately, and as a consumer, it's really hard to know what to get. So the way that you can mitigate that is to get a COA. If you can.
And what is the COA? What's the COA?
Yeah, so it's just a kind of a certificate of authenticity, right? So it just a third-party lab tests it and says, I will certify these values in this product. And so Most companies should be willing to give that to you. If you live in a state where THC is illegal, but you want to use a hemp-based product, there's a company called Elvet. They're in Maine. They will offer you a COA on anything that they make, super high quality products. You can order them online. So, that's one reputable company. If you're in Denver or California or Washington, other states where it's legal, definitely check out like companies like Iovia. There's another one called Sweet Mary Jane's that's based out of Denver. They will give you a COA. Any company that's willing to show you the testing that's gone behind their product, then you know that it's generally going to be pretty quality.
Okay. Well, hey, the final word. We're going to talk to you again, and I'll tell you when and where. Clint is. We are hosting the 420 MSP 2-day conference in Denver, Colorado, June 2nd and 3rd. Nice. So I'm gonna get you and Joe to stop by, and I'm gonna do a man on the street with you. Okay, we're gonna check in, and so let's think about that. That's almost 6 months away, or I'm sorry, just under 6 months away. So why don't you be thinking about when I see you again in 6 months? What updates do you have from your research? That would be very interesting.
All right. I think the latest thing would just be, what we're looking at now is including CBDA, because we're seeing some really positive benefits. At least there's some research to support that we might see some benefits of including CBDA in the mixture. So we're using CBD, CBDA, THC, and those three terpenes that I mentioned to kind of fight this cancer battle. So that's the next thing that we're trying.
All right, my fine feathered friend, and thanks to Jenny over in the radio control room as always.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny.
Have a nice day.
All right, thanks guys, I appreciate it.